You are listening to Compliance is Cool, a special series of Medical Spa Insider, presented by the American Med Spa Association. This week, AmSpa founder Alex Thiersch and General Counsel Patrick O'Brien discuss their trip to Indiana to lobby for changes to Senate Bill 282. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a rating or review. And if you have a medical spa compliance question, remember that you can email it to alex@americanmedspa.org to be answered on a future episode.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the program, the Compliance is Cool program. And this is Alex Thiersch. Welcome to Compliance is Cool, sponsored by the American Med Spa Association. And we have on the AmSpa Compliance is Cool hotline, the one and only Patrick O'Brien, General Counsel, Compliance is Cool, OG member of the Compliance is Cool Club.
Good morning.
I know. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I was telling you haven't heard this yet, but I think I did an intro talking about the Compliance is Cool kind of brand that I'm trying to create. And I said, and I know this is true, that back in high school, I think there was like two groups or three that were really cool. One was the football players, one was the cheerleaders, and then there was the compliance club. That was, and I know that. I mean, that was those.
Yeah, that was the happening place there.
Yeah, it was like debate, compliance, like that's where it was. So we're really trying to bring that back and make that a thing. And I have to say, this last week, I mean, this was a really crazy busy time for those of us in the Compliance is Cool world, because we were busy. For those of you who have been paying attention, there has been a lot of activity just this year period, but this past week in Indiana and other states, but specifically in Indiana, where there was a flurry of activity, and it's relevant all over the place. So we're going to talk a little bit about the legislation, Senate Bill 282, that was passed out of the Senate, debated briefly in the House Public Health Committee, and then passed out of the Public Health Committee and is now in the House, waiting to get passed out of there. And we'll talk a little bit about that, mostly about that, and why it's not only relevant to obviously the medical spas, but to the nation as a whole, because I think it's a precursor of what's to come. It's kind of it really encapsulates one segment of what's going on in the industry. And there's plenty of these things to go around, but one area of kind of this gathering band of clouds that I've seen on the horizon that is forming against us, and not necessarily directly against us. It's just one of the challenges that we as an industry have to face that we've got to come together on. I think this is really really encapsulated and personified by what happened in Indiana. So let's kind of get to it, because this was interesting. So this bill came up. We were brought in a little bit late in the process, which often happens. Indiana is interesting, and Patrick, jump in and correct me if I'm off base here, but Indiana's legislature meets. They don't meet every 2 years, but it's once a year where they really get into like the actual business, and then the every other year is like financial and budgeting, from what I recall. So and when they get into actual lawmaking like this, it's a fairly short period of time. So they're cramming a lot of things in to a short period of time. This bill came through. We found out about it basically after it had already passed the Senate with pretty little amendment discussion. When we got it, it was ostensibly a medical spa regulation bill, but it was also a compounding pharmacy bill. Both of these two sides of these bills, which we'll talk about in a second, were together. And it was interesting when we saw it, because we saw about four of these things pop up at virtually the same time that are compounding pharmacy bills and med spa regulation bills together in one. And they don't really make a whole lot of sense together. And Patrick, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because they're to me at least, and I think to us in the industry, they're disparate. There's not a whole lot of overt connection between compounding pharmacies on the one hand and medical spas, but nevertheless, these bills have popped up, and there's a reason for that. So this one in Illinois, in Indiana, passed through the Senate. It kind of took us a little bit by surprise, and we saw it in the House. And why don't we go through a little bit about what the bill was on a high level? Um, what kind of stood out to you about it, Patrick? And then we can get into a little bit more as to kind of what the genesis of this is, and what was surprising about it with respect to the compounding pharmacy part of it.
Yeah, so when it was first introduced, it had a section on compounding that seemed pretty benign in that it was, compounding pharmacies need to follow FDA rules on compounding. And, that was pretty much it. It had some provisions for reporting and stuff like that. It also had a med spa licensing provision that started out pretty mild, where it was just you need to have a name, an address, and designate a responsible person, which
Mhm.
sounds like a medical director, but it wasn't, because it didn't really have any qualifications for them, and it didn't really say what they needed to do. But it was, pretty mild, and it'd make it like a database that you could look up.
Mhm.
Through the Senate, it received a lot of amendments. The compounding part changed and became more restrictive. At one point, it was focused only on GLP-1 compounding. At one point, it was they were wanting to remove it entirely, but that didn't go in. But it became more and more restrictive. The med spa licensing became incredibly restrictive. It added in addition to like the name and address and a responsible person, you needed to also list every med spa procedure that you were going to perform there, every medication and drug you were going to be using, and then list all of the employees that would be providing services. And that's when it really became kind of uh, just like a bad bill.
Yeah, yeah. And it was like, not only was it services and employees, it was contemplated services. It had this language where basically anything that you were contemplating providing, it had a very broad definition of med spa, which cast this incredibly broad net over
It had health
physicians.
and health, wellness, longevity,
Yeah.
nutrition, stuff like that would
I
all
mean,
be rolled into it.
it was everybody. And so that's when, and as we've seen with a lot of these bills, it's not so easy for us to catch these things, which has been frustrating. I don't know about for you, but it's been frustrating that we get notice of these things, but that they move so quickly that oftentimes by the time we get notice of them, look at them, get a handle on what's going on, it's already gone through iterations. There's already been amendments. And so by the time we're getting it and we can actually get on the ground and start trying to do something about it, contact some folks and figure out, okay, what can we do? Some of this stuff's already happened. So by the time we're able to get our hands around it and even start thinking about getting a lobbyist and taking action, this bill has basically already come out of the Senate in the form that we're talking about. It's there's already been tons of tinkering, and this is where we get involved. And I think for me, and I'm not going to be too cynical about this, because this is the way that legislation works. You don't want to know what goes into legislation and hot dogs. That's the saying. But when we kind of got down on the ground, I reached out to a few folks in Indiana who then reached out to me. A bunch of people started talking about this. The bill came out. It was in that format you were talking about, Patrick. It wasn't good. It was just it was this again. It had these disparate parts, GLP-1s on the one hand, and then it had these med spa restrictions that didn't seem to fit. And that's when we kind of found out what was going on. And it was no secret in Indiana. And I wrote some articles about this, and Patrick, you put together a bunch of summaries on what the bill was. Um, this was driven by pharmacy, big pharma. I mean, not pharmacy. Um, I won't say it was funded by them, but it was driven by them. And so it turned out that this was kind of a function of the GLP-1 industry. And we've all been a part of that. And it's become this huge, massive thing. But the GLP-1 industry is kind of what beget this bill. And it just so happens that Eli Lilly is headquartered in Indianapolis. Nothing against them. We all like profits. They like profits. But that was kind of what took this thing over, and it kind of took this momentum up. And what I realized very, very quickly as we started talking to folks in Indianapolis and lobbyists was that nothing was really going to happen with this bill without their involvement. And that was very, very clear from the beginning. Patrick, you weren't involved in some of these conversations, but literally it was like their lobbyists, and which was not just one, by the way, it was like six. They had like six lobbyists and they had all these interest groups. They were controlling kind of from the beginning what was going on. Controlling is maybe not the right word, but they were certainly involved. And certainly controlling is not the right word later on, because I think, as we saw, the Indiana legislature did a good job of kind of doing their job. So, but that was a little bit disconcerting at the beginning when we got in there and found out, look, this is all being driven by pharmaceutical companies who don't really have an interest in med spas. They have an interest in something else, and that was tough to kind of swallow at first, but we were able to kind of get in there and get involved and make, I think we made a difference. But so the process goes like this, where the bill is transferred over to the House. When you saw the bill, when it went over to the House, what we talked a little bit about this, but what were two or three things that well, first of all, let's talk about this. The Board of Pharmacy. That was one thing that jumped out at me. What role does the Board of Pharmacy have in medical spas typically? And what would this bill have done with that?
Yeah, so usually the pharmacy board, regulates pharmacists and pharmacies. They don't really have much to do with medical practices and med spas. Um, they're in most states, if there's like some major medication violations or handling things, that would be kind of their area to come in. But this bill initially placed all of this regulation, including the med spa registry, under the pharmacy board. And I think knowing kind of what we know now, it's obvious that they weren't really concerned with the med spa procedures or the med spas themselves. They wanted to keep an eye on the GLP-1s, is the kind of roundabout way of it. That part of that got transferred over to the medical board in later amendments. The other kind of weird things is you had this responsible person who was seemingly could have been anybody, and then finally it sort of got changed to where it was going to be a licensed prescriber, so like a physician, PA, NP, which makes sense, makes it more kind of like a medical director kind of role. But the really sort of weird parts was listing basically every aspect of the medical spa, the medications used, the procedures, and all the employees. That was the really kind of weird part. Like nobody does that.
Yeah, yeah. I think we were. I don't know if it was you or maybe Sam Pondorm was emailing. It was death by paperwork, right? It seemed
Mhm.
like it was. And just for those of you who haven't seen the bill, it was literally med spas were required to list every possible medication. That's maybe a little strong, but every contemplated medication treatment that they were are going to use or thinking about using, including any compounded ones, and file it with the Board of Pharma, then the Board of Medicine. And that's not, first of all, that's not required in any other area of medicine, right? I mean, this is
Yeah.
unusual. Let's get that out there.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, it's really strange.
yeah. What was your thought on that? I mean, because you're in the weeds on this more than I am on a daily basis. When you saw the language of it, what did you think? I mean, I'm pretty cynical about these things, but what was your thought?
Yeah, I mean, it initially it seemed like it was being written by someone who wanted to put med spas kind of out of business, or at least on the back foot,
Hmm.
just to make it too difficult to operate legally.
Yeah,
Um, as it's gone on, my opinion, I mean, that may be part of the side effect, but I really think it's to extract to get a listing of people who do deal in compounded medications
yeah,
without kind of directly saying it.
yeah. I think that's right. And so, moving along. But I think the point being is that the bill passed out of the Indiana Senate with these provisions intact,
Mhm.
right? So
Yep.
these restrictive med spa provisions. It was no longer governed by the Board of Pharmacy, so it did get switched to the Board of Medicine, which was an improvement. But it still had all of these restrictions for medical spas. It was still it was very oppressive, and that's kind of when we got involved. And one of the other things that I think where this is relevant for folks that are listening is that we saw versions of this bill in other states, right? So we've seen this kind of same language pop up in what, Florida, Iowa, now Arizona,
Yeah, they've got the same a lot of the same language and structure, and very very similar. So it'd be impossible to have those independently be created. They've
right,
got to be coming from one source.
right. So this is a concerted, coordinated effort from big pharma or somebody, um, or some coordinated effort to file these bills at once, and which is tough because now we've got to kind of battle these on multiple fronts. And so that's we are going to talk about that. We might not get to that today. I don't think we will, but in the coming couple days, we'll talk about what's going on in those states because it's important because those are happening simultaneously. Um, but let's talk about Indiana because I think it was both for me at least, because I was involved on the ground there. And also, by the way, I kudos to you, Patrick, because like you were answering my emails, and I don't know anything about the compounding world, and the stuff you were able to get me was on point, and it was so helpful. But what happened in Indiana, I think, was both encouraging and depressing at the same time, if that's possible. So I went down there for the hearing, for the House hearing. So the bill was in the House Public Health, and just from as the kind of how a bill becomes a law. Um, Patrick, in Indiana, explain kind of the process. The bill goes over to the House, goes to the committee, and then it goes out of the committee. Like what's the process? So they know.
Yeah, so usually when a bill comes into one of the bodies, a House or a Senate, they'll assign it to kind of a specialist committee they focus on certain topics, and their job is to kind of review it and determine if it's good or not. Usually they'll have a public hearing and take in public comments and consider those, but then at the end they take a vote of whether it should be passed, it should not be passed, if it should be amended, and then it goes back to the full House with that kind of recommendation, and then the full House, uses that recommendation to make their larger votes, and then it moves on from there. So in this case, it had gotten sailed through the Senate and was in the House committee, and then you were at the hearing, and they listened to, took some testimony.
Yeah, yeah, and it was so. This has always been. I've been to a few of these. It's every state is different, but it's the same. And so I go down there, and there was a couple very enterprising, enthusiastic members of the Indiana Med Spa community who were there, and kudos to all of you, and thanks so much for. I can't. There's not enough time to name everybody, but and big shout out to our friends at Joey Fox Consulting, including the one and only Joey Fox, who was our lobbyist, and his man Berkeley. I don't say Berkeley. Berkeley is his name. They did honestly. They did a phenomenal job. Those guys. I learned right away that Lilly and the other groups that were down there, because I mean, we're talking about a company that has 3 to 4 billion in profit per quarter, right? And they had, because they're based in Indianapolis, they have a full grasp on every single large lobbying firm in the state. So when you go down there's no lobbyists available. And so you have to kind of find what you can get. Now, Joey, that we got, Joey Fox Consulting, for those of you who are looking for somebody, he was great. And we were lucky enough to get him. But he's smaller, right? So it's a smaller group. And he was kind of up against this, monolith of this massive company with literally 5 different interest groups that all had their own lobbying groups. And we kind of march in there trying to do our thing. And it was fascinating because the main thing that I saw that was disconcerting was with the speed with which what they were trying to do this. They clearly had this bill that they were trying to get through, and they had a less than a week to do it. So they had less than a week to try to somehow consolidate a compounding pharmacy bill that clearly was about GLP-1s, but they didn't want to make it seem like it was about GLP-1s and also about med spas, even though there's not really a whole lot of connection between GLP-1s and compounding and med spas, at least not intrinsically in the regulation side. And so that was just a fascinating process to see. So that was the kind of the depressing part because it really was, there was not going to be a moment where this thing was not going to pass. Like they were going to pass something. It was going to get through. There was going to be some sort of compounding rule. There was going to be some sort of med spa regulation rule. And they were going to be in the same bill. And so I say this just kind of from as a point of caution to everybody is that we're not dealing with when these laws are brought up, we're not dealing with, oh, let's sit down and have a good civil conversation about policy and make a good, strong law. Like that's not how it works. It's like this was happening. And it's like either we get at the table or we don't. You either get, on the train or the train runs you over. And that was kind of depressing, I have to say, and Patrick, I mean, we've kind of seen that a little bit with Texas too, but man, I don't know. I guess I just have to kind of get used to it.
Yeah, this one I think is the most I guess like motivated or driven bill I've seen. But a lot of times they, whoever has been working on them has had, ample time to marshal their forces, and so it's got, huge momentum. And then when you come in at kind of the last minute, there's, not much way you can turn the boat.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of maybe the takeaway is that we've got to get momentum early on because by the time we get in, it's like a freight train already. So, and I remember sitting there, first of all, I get up there and testify, and it was great. And the good part about all this is that the Indiana legislature was, even though this was something was going to pass, they were very well prepared. They were very interested. They had insightful questions, very, very intelligent questions. They wanted to make a good, smart bill. And that was really, really, really refreshing because it wasn't just like, what does a physician assistant do? Like, I didn't realize that they could prescribe. Like, it was not that. They were very, very in tune with what was going on. They had clearly listened. They had read everything, not just one or two of them. It was all of them. So that was refreshing. The other thing that was refreshing was the chair of the committee, Dr. Barrett, who I've come to learn is retiring, and he kind of took this on as his swan song, and he's a physician, and so he was going to get this through too because he wants this to be kind of his one of his final things. He worked his ass off to negotiate it through, and so we were able through. And I remember sitting here, I'm emailing like Patrick questions about legal questions. And I'm texting, our lobbyist who's in the room with the lawmakers, and we're like striking things and changing things. And literally some of those changes came out in the amendment to the bill. And it was extraordinary to see this process play out over the course of like 12 hours, just in order to get some of these things taken. But at the end of the day, we were able to get, I think, a fair amount of things changed. And so now the bill is out of the committee and it's been amended. It's certainly not perfect, but it's better. It's kind of an okay med spa bill now, right? It's not terrible. It's not great, but it's certainly not like it was. Talk about what we got now and like where we sit currently.
Yeah, so it was in the kind of one version back, it had a very broad definition of compounding that would have brought in that included reconstituting.
Oh yeah, let's actually talk about that because that was let's take a step because that could come back in others.
Right. Yeah, I mean everything can, but so most states compounding is like mixing, making, producing a medication. And usually they use lots of words like diluting, reconstituting. But every definition, including the USP kind of the definition,
Yeah.
excludes reconstituting medication based on a manufacturer's label.
Right.
So lots of medications and in our world, botulinum toxins and some fillers need to be reconstituted. And because that's a manufacturer thing, that's not considered compounding.
Right.
If it was, it really limits who's able to do that.
Right.
And so this definition was going to have reconstituting in there without any kind of exception,
Right.
which would have been
Right.
a pain, giant pain for everybody. The other thing is that the registry got better. It took out the listing all of your employees on there.
Right.
It got out. I think it's still. I kind of forget what the final latest version is, but I think it still has procedures and compounded medications.
I don't think it has. I don't think it has. I don't know that it has procedures any longer.
Okay.
Yep. So
Yeah,
they took
those
out
were like
procedures.
coming in and out. So, but so it's better, not as good as some of the other med spa registries are, where it's very simple and easy to do, but better. And then a lot of the other things are kind of more, and there's some exceptions for physicians' offices don't
Mhm.
aren't considered medical spas under the current
Yep.
version.
Yep. The I can't remember. Was the reconstituting? We're getting into the weeds here a little bit. Provision, was
Mhm.
that in the original bill that was in the Senate? Do you have any idea?
Um, I don't recall.
We'll have to check because that was a surprise to me, and why that's big, and why we'll have to keep an eye on this in other states is that um, at the hearing, the conversation there's really two separate conversations. One was all about the compounding side, one was about the med spa side. Most of it was about the compounding side. Um, and then when the amendment came out after the hearing, this language about reconstituting was in the bill. And for those of you who are in med spas, like med spas generally don't do a lot of compounding. Like we're not pharmacies. We dispense medications, but we're not doing a lot of compound. We shouldn't be, at least. If any medications that are being compounded should be done at a compounding pharmacy. But the language that was inserted basically said that med spas would now be qualified as compounding pharmacies, and these reporting requirements where med spas now had to basically keep records as if they were compound pharmacies, and that was a bit terrifying because that would have meant enormous amounts of record keeping. Now, again, kudos to Dr. Barrett, Representative Barrett, and because they did get that out. They saw that and they took that out. And so there has been some improvement. We will do a more kind of fulsome review and analysis of what the bill is now. I have been told there are some additional changes that might be made, including on some of the drugs that need to be listed as far as like number of prescriptions and things like that. So it's going to be much more of a general registry. But long story short, right now, Indiana is going to have a registry for med spas where they are going to have to register their address, who the responsible practitioner is, general treatments they provide. That is definitely coming down the pipe, and there's not going to be anything we can do about that. What's next for Indiana? Like, what's the next step in the process as far as you can tell?
Well, it would get kind of calendared for a vote in the full House, and judging by everything that's happened, they're probably going to pass it. And then from there, because the versions between the Senate version and the House version are different, usually they'll go and they'll have like a joint reconciliation where they, either they approve or settle on the final language. And then from there, it would go to the governor, and just like that, how a bill becomes a law, the governor signs it, and then it's done. Some of the provisions right now go into effect like in October of this year,
Mhm.
and so it'd be a pretty quick turnaround on when these things. But there's multiple stages where the language can still be changed.
All right, what's kind of final thoughts on this? What's your lesson?
Um, yeah, I mean, this is I guess well, it pays to have billions of dollars behind you. Um,
Well,
but
you know what? That's why we've got you, Patrick.
but really the kind of takeaway is that reacting is not really going to be enough.
Yeah,
That that
yeah,
these you have to be kind of involved in the very earliest stages. Talking to your representatives, your senators, introducing your own bills to try to get good ones on before bad ones come in. Just the kind of the early bird gets the worm, I guess would be the cliche.
yeah. And that's just real quick, talk about like because you're kind of on the front lines of what we're doing to track, and it's to track these bills, and it's such a monumental task, especially at the beginning of the year, right? When all this stuff kind of comes in.
Mhm.
Like, what's like we have a service where we're tracking these bills, but like one of my questions would be is if I was listening, it's like, what can I do as a med spa owner, or what can we do as an industry to kind of preempt this stuff? Like, what can we do to find out earlier? Because we got into this after clearly there's been work in the background, a lot of work, and this is all happening. And so we're kind of like we're standing on the shore trying to break back the waves now. So how do we be more proactive?
Yeah, well, like the drafting of bills and things is always going to be kind of behind the scenes.
Right,
The first sort of like public notice you get is when it's actually introduced.
right.
So really the if you're interested in an area, you need to be talking with like your representative, and you need to be uh, keeping your ear to the committees that matter to your industry. So there's always like a public health or a healthcare
Mhm.
services or health and human services committee in both things, and those have a list of people. It's all you can all look up who it is, and you know if you're really active, set up regular, you know, try to get meetings with them as a private individual, or at least get your opinions known, so that when something like this starts rolling, they'll already have kind of in their head what the public opinion is on the thing, instead of learning about it as the special interest group comes in with their idea.
Yeah, and that's lucky for all of you. That's what we are, and there's more of this coming because I've got a lot of information on this that I have started to work on quite diligently. So there's more of this coming because we are going to be doing that um, this year quite a bit. So and we have to as an industry. Hopefully, what this will show all of you is that because this is coming. If it hasn't come to your state, and we'll jump on in the coming days and tell you about Arizona and some of the are any of those other states, where the Arizona, Florida, Iowa,
And
like yeah, is there anything pending that we need to be concerned about?
uh, they are not nearly as active as the Indiana one.
Right.
Currently they're all in committee. Iowa one has had a subcommittee give a recommendation of due pass, which that one's more technical in that it's going to move through a whole different process. But the Arizona and Florida ones are not like they're not at breakneck pace. So
Okay.
there's still time to get and start talking to those committees.
Okay, so we're going to work on that here and in the coming days. Let you know about that. Um, last thing to mention, and we'll maybe jump on a separate podcast about this as well in the coming days. Catch me up on what's going on in New Jersey.
Oh, so New Jersey, they had, like a lot of states during COVID, had relaxed practice requirements for advanced practitioners, like physician assistants and advanced practice nurses. Most states, or little less than half now, require that they have a collaboration or supervising physician to work with. And during COVID, that was difficult to do because, you couldn't necessarily be co-located with people and stuff like that. So a lot of states relaxed these requirements and basically let them practice more independently.
Yep.
New Jersey never ended up revoking that kind of waiver until January of this year. They rescinded it, and so that's going to put all of those practitioners that have been working this way for 5 years plus kind of pull the rug out from under them. There is a bill. They've been trying to pass it for couple years that would give nurse practitioners independent practice after they complete kind of a period of about 2 years of supervised practice. And it's in the Senate, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one, the ones in the past have not obviously passed or moved forward much. And so this one, now is a chance to kind of make this current practice environment a permanent thing.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, my first of all, is there do we have any context or inkling into why? Because first of all, the governor of New Jersey is the one who signed the order rescinding the whatever the order was allowing this independent practice since COVID, right? Is there any context as to why that was done now in January of 26 as opposed to before? Do we know?
No, well, no. It's not that they were revoking specifically this practice thing, but they were ending the state of emergency that kind of was the time frame for this waiver. And obviously the governors have changed in between that time, and I think there was from articles I read there, they were also ending other states of emergency that had passed from like winter storms and things. And so I think it may have been kind of a just sort of cleaning up, of these ongoing states of emergency and kind of closing the loop on them. But I don't know why now, why not, back in 21 or 22 or whatever.
Yeah. Because I mean, I have conflicting thoughts about this because on the one hand, and I've seen some, there's been some nastiness on social media about this too. It's like people are getting kind of all worked up. And on the one hand, I agree with those that say, look, this was meant to be temporary. It was never meant to be more than, an emergency temporary fix. So what are you complaining about? Like, I get that sentiment. But on the other hand, it's like, they kind of let it go for 5 full years, and it's like to do it now, and all of a sudden well, nope, now we're going to stop it. I kind of get that being that's a little bit of a sudden pull the rug out from under you, like without much notice either. It was like, oh, you got 30 days or whatever
Yeah,
it was, 45 days.
there was kind of a similar thing that happened or is still happening in New York. They, also had waivers. They actually passed a law that made nurse practitioners independent years ago, but they had it sunset within like 2 or 3 years, and then they keep extending it. So every, you get, and they let it go like way down to the wire. So, you have this like a year to 6 months where you don't know if you've got to change your practice or not. And then it keeps getting extended. And so it's like, okay, well, you're not going to change it, but then it's entirely possible that they might not do it this time, and then then you're done.
Do it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and then the governor just extended the deadline just now, right? For another 45 days in New Jersey.
Yes, I think gave a 45-day extensions that gives and really no matter what happens with the bill, it would not come into effect fast enough to solve the immediate problem unless the governor keeps extending it. And so, with this extension, if you're in that kind of situation where you don't have a collaborating physician, you probably need to be looking for one because you don't know if he'll keep extending it or if he won't.
Right. And again, that also works for NPs, but PAs need supervising physician no matter what. So they're in that position period.
Right. Yeah. They there's no current bill for them. Many states have started to move to a more lower oversight physician assistant practice. New Jersey's not one of them yet. But yeah, they would need to find physicians.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I mean, that's why you're cool, Patrick. I mean, clearly. Anything else going on you want to mention? I mean, in the world of compliance?
No. I think we'll have when we come back on the other bills, there'll be
Yeah.
some stuff to get into on those.
Yeah. I think we'll end it here, and so we don't have someone driving off a bridge just to make us stop
Yeah.
talking about the cool compliance stuff.
Got to stay awake, everybody.
Appreciate you listening. Thank you for the insight, Patrick. And we will have more to come. But thanks very much. Appreciate it. Compliance is cool. Remember that. It's so cool.
Thank you to our producer, Madeline Moeller, marketing content coordinator, who organizes the podcast schedule and guests, and provides topics and talking points. Audio and video editing, voiceover, graphics, and platform management are provided by myself, Derek Hawk, digital marketing supervisor. Our theme is provided by Maka Music. Thank you for watching or listening to the Medical Spa Insider Podcast. Please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for future episodes. Ratings and reviews are greatly appreciated. For more information about the American Med Spa Association, visit americanmedspa.org. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement by AmSpa. Opinions presented by guests are their own and do not constitute an endorsement of them or the entities they represent. AmSpa provides this podcast for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice or establish an attorney-client relationship. Please consult an attorney with any legal issues.